Welcome to Raptors Weekly for the week of December 21st. It's a week where I don't really know how to feel because the Raptors have beaten Miami convincingly in Miami, but then they proceeded to lose to the Kings at home in a very gut-wrenching loss. Joining me to talk about the week and a lot more is Andrew Thompson. Hey, Andrew.
Hello, Zarar. How are you?
Not bad. Andrew, how's your Twitter account going? Have you hit 100 followers yet?
I think I lost a couple bots. I've gone down from 106 to 104 followers. It's not a big social media week for me.
No, eh? Matt Shantz joins the Rapcast after quite some time. Matt hails from Alberta, as you were talking pre-show, and he joins us today after quite some time. What keeps you away from the show, Matt?
Just busy with work and life, and you always, email me the night before, and sometimes life is busy, Zarar, so you got to give me some notice, I think.
All right. Fair enough. Matt, do you promise not to get ejected tonight?
I will do my best. I'm coming in with some anger like Lowry, but I'll try to remain calm for you.
All right, I guess let's start with Matt and the game that we just saw, which is the Raptors losing to the Kings at home, 104-94, to fall to 17-12 in the East. How does this loss make you feel? Does it completely negate what we did in Miami, or do you see Miami as something totally different than what we saw today? Because I'm really confused on how to feel at this point, because we had a great win followed by a terrible loss. Do they offset? What do you take from this?
I don't think they offset at all. I think that this is the issue with this team. Afterwards, Casey came out, after the game, he came out and said in his scrum, basically, shame on us. They got full of themselves from the Miami win, and now they're just right back down. They tend to play to the level of their opponent, and it's getting really tiresome for me.
What does that mean, play to the level to their opponent? I hear that a lot, but I just don't understand. Like, do you look at a team like Sacramento coming in and go, it's going to be an easy night, therefore we don't have to expend the same effort we did in Miami? Is that what it comes down to?
I think for me, it at least appears that way. The one that really stands out to me is, I know we'll get into this later, but the Charlotte win earlier this week, without Al Jeff, without Batum, without Kid Gilchrist, they were really shorthanded, and we just came out with nothing, just dead legs, nothing going to our game. And to me, there seems to be problems with motivation. I can't figure out any other way to really explain it.
But isn't that supposed to be Dwayne Casey's calling card, motivation? That's the one thing that we all praise him for, is to getting this team ready to play over the last 2.5 years, especially after the Triano era, which saw like a really lack of effort in those couple of years. Dwayne Casey's calling card is effort. So does it fall on the coach, the fact that the teams are coming out, like we're coming out so slow against really bad teams? Like against the Kings, I think we were down like 20-2 or something ridiculous to start the game.
Yeah, I think it was a 20-point deficit 9 minutes into the game, which is just unacceptable. You cannot expect to win any games or at least many games, if you're coming out flat-footed like that. If it's on Casey, that I don't know. I tend to blame a lot on Casey in my day-to-day life as a Raptors fan. But at the same time, you got to have guys leading by example as well, and Lowry hasn't started well recently. DeRozan has. He's been surprisingly an incredibly efficient player over the last week, maybe even 2 weeks if we're looking at it. But Lowry, who is he is the engine that runs the team. I don't know what's been different with him this week, but it's just been incredibly inconsistent.
Yeah, Andrew, the slow start. What do you attribute that to?
I don't want to go put on my sports fan psychology hat on again, but honestly, it could just be minutes played. Like, you're looking at the Raptors starters, especially DeRozan and Lowry, right up at the top of the league as far as minutes played, especially this week. I think the starters, almost to a man, played over 30 or 35 minutes. The week started with DeRozan and Lowry playing like 44 and 41 minutes apiece in the Pacers game. 4 games this week, some travel. This week at least, it seems not ridiculous to suggest that there's a certain amount of fatigue, if not displaying physically, like at least mentally. Like, guys just are not sharp to start the game, and I don't know if it's the grind or if it's something else, but there could be something to the fact that whether we are losing a game badly or winning a game by a lot, you look at the minutes at the end of a game and there's still DeRozan playing at or around 40 minutes, and they've got to find a way to try to offset that somehow.
So obviously we rely on Lowry and DeRozan a lot, and in the Kings game, Lowry got ejected in the third quarter, I think it was, and after picking up a couple of technicals, and that's been Andrew a trend with him of late, where he's getting really frustrated really early, and it's having an effect on his game. He's shooting a lower percentage of late as well, and I think fatigue has something to do with it. But at the same time, do you sense like a sense of frustration from Lowry? Maybe his teammates aren't performing, so he's getting frustrated. What is his source of frustration at this point?
I mean, I've got a sense of frustration from Lowry towards certain teammates, certain coaches, and the referees pretty much since he got here. I think that's kind of a part of his game. I don't know if that's really different this year. He does kind of tend to have some dips as the season's gone along too, which is what he attributed to the reason for becoming skinny Kyle Lowry going into the season was. Yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about this unless this starts to become 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time. I think it's okay to have a week where you just kind of get worn out and frustrated by things around you. And, like the Raptors didn't have a great week, like 1-3 and some disappointing losses in there. But that's kind of the way the entire Eastern Conference outside of Cleveland has looked right now. You're not really surprised by who wins or loses a game on almost any given night. It's sort of weird.
So Matt brought up Andrew brought up the minutes played argument. And at this point, you look at the East, 1-8, 3.5 games separate the Cavs versus the Pistons, who are in the final playoff spot. Do you blame Casey for actually trying to stay competitive in the East? Because it really, looking at the standings, it doesn't look like he has much of a choice but to win every game at hand. And he can he afford to give Lowry and DeRozan a rest at this point?
Not with the injuries that they have. With Carroll and Valanciunas out, they're basically playing with 8 players. You can't trust heavy minutes or even any minutes yet to guys like DeLon Wright and Norman Powell, and definitely none for Anthony Bennett and all the way down the line. My issue is, the minutes are crazy. I think coming into tonight's game, DeRozan and Lowry were both averaging over 36 minutes a game, which is way too high for a full season for those guys. But at the same time, contrary to my one challenge with what Andrew was saying earlier, is the one game that they won this week was on a back-to-back in Miami after playing the night before in Charlotte. I understand that they're tired and the minutes need to come down when they get their bodies back into the lineup. But it still doesn't explain to me how they can come out flat-footed in Charlotte and then the one night later just handle Miami.
It's a bit of a mystery, and playing down to the level or playing up or down to the level of your opposition seems to be like one thing. But let's talk about some themes this week. We saw, before we get to DeMar DeRozan and his strong play, there's a couple of positives from Patrick Patterson and Terrence Ross. Andrew, I know you were on last check, you had very little Terrence Ross stock in your portfolio. Did you regret selling any of that at this point?
No, I haven't sold yet. I talked more recently about how, just looking at where his career numbers are and what he'd been doing, it's as much as everyone just wanted to punt completely on Terrence Ross, the shooting numbers were obviously going to come back up. And both he and Patterson have looked really confident in taking shots and wanting to shoot and being quick in their decision making, which is really good to see. And they've both played great recently, especially Ross. I mean, double digits in 5 straight games, is it now? Scoring?
Yeah, and he's hitting his threes. He was 3 for 10 against the Kings, but so he took a lot of shots, and they were good shots. I mean, some of them were just missed. He was 5 for 8 against the Heat. He was 5 for 10 against the Hornets, and even against the Pacers, he was 2 for 6. So overall, he shot close to 50% from 3. So a bit of a return from Ross, which is definitely positive. Anything particular you attribute this to? Is it Dwayne Casey shuffling him into the starting lineup and then back onto the bench? From my view, it seems like he's always been a better bench performer for me. That's how I always classified him, and I think so far in the 2 games that he's come off the bench this week, he's done really well.
Yeah, he looked really tentative coming off the bench early on in the season, like he wasn't really sure where his role was, and he seems to have discovered what that is and really thrived coming off the bench. He's got a lot more energy. He's playing more minutes right now, even not starting with the regular starters, which is helpful as well. And he's looked really, really good.
Mm-hmm. And the other guy that's made a mark this week is Patrick Patterson, who, despite starting games off slowly, like for the first half against the Kings, he missed some really makeable shots, wide open threes that he clanked. But in the second half, he stepped up and he hit his jumpers. Overall, he was 4 for 8 from three. I think this is the first time he's hit 4 threes in a game for quite some time. Matt, were you ever worried about Patrick Patterson not finding his form?
It seemed like just a complete lack of confidence. So it wasn't necessarily about him getting up his percentages, things like that. What I was worried about was him actually being willing to take the shots. There was early in the season, even in preseason, where he would get the ball in the corner wide open or on the wing, and he would freeze. He would pause. He would be uncertain whether to put up the shot or pass the ball. Even times when he would get it immediately, be wide open, but first instinct was to pass, to find somebody else, even if they were covered. So it's nice to see, that still comes back here and there, where you wonder whether he's just trying a little bit too hard to fit within a framework and not trying not to force things. But he needs to take those shots. Even a lot of the shots that the 3-pointers that Ross missed tonight were later in the game. I think he started like 3 for 5 or something along those lines and missed his last few. And it's because, we had a lack of spacing on the floor. And so they guard the few shooters that are out there. So Patterson needs to be a threat, and it's nice to see that coming back.
What did you make of his matchup with DeMarcus Cousins here in the fourth quarter? Dwayne Casey opted to go with a Patterson v. Cousins matchup, hoping that Patterson kind of exploit him. He did on a couple of possessions, but more or less it was the Kings running everything to DeMarcus Cousins, whose passing today was just fantastic, and he found the open shooters and really made the Raps pay.
Yeah, so it wasn't so much that Cousins exploited Patterson or any of the other defenders. I mean, you would take 5 for 13 for 15 points and 9 rebounds from Cousins any day of the week if you're the opponent. That's a slow night for him and is well below his career averages against the Raptors. So head-to-head, he actually did reasonably well
I wouldn't
in
say
that
head-to-head,
regard.
though, man. The Raptors were throwing like double and triple teams at him the entire fourth quarter to get the ball out of his hands, and I thought he did really well passing it out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But that's what you need to do against a monster like Cousins, is you need to send help if he gets the ball. And nobody on our team right now is, especially with Valanciunas being out, is strong enough to really keep Cousins out of the lane.
Let's switch to DeMar DeRozan a little bit, man. Andrew, he's been more efficient. He's not hitting 50% yet or anything like that, but he's had games where he's carried the Raptors in an efficient manner, and today was one of those nights. He was let's just check the stats here. He was 10 for 24, so not hugely efficient there, but against Miami he was superb, 10 for 17. Against Charlotte he was 12 for 25. Overall he's hitting his mid-range jumper with more consistency. But at the same time, it's still the same kind of shots. He's just making them more. They're still sort of individualistic, and you kind of cringe when he takes it. But at least you're happy this week that he's making them at a higher percentage.
Yeah, this week I'm happy, but like you said, he's just making more of the shots for the most part. There's sections of the game tonight and some other times when he made a more considered effort to get to the rim. I think he went to the line 13 times against Miami, and that was more important really than the jumpers that he hit. But he's going to hit those jumpers sometimes, but looking at throughout his career and especially the last 2 years, he's not anywhere near a good mid-range shooter. He's just a high-volume mid-range shooter, and it's great that those shots went in this week. But yeah, you cringe at it because you know that that's not a consistent shot. He's something around 40 or 41% for mid-range, which, considering that's a really hard shot to get an offensive rebound on, and it's worth 2 points. It's far less than a point of possession. It's not something that you're really looking to rely upon.
Well, having said that, he did tear apart Justice Winslow and even Luol Deng on some possessions against Miami. That was fun to watch, man. It's rare to see a Raptor not named Kyle Lowry come up with a huge performance on the road against a good team. And DeRozan, without him, we lose this game easily, and he was strong in this one.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think I'm just trying to get to the point that I don't want to play the result. I don't want to say, hey, it went in for this game or these series of games, so therefore it was a good shot. I think it's either a good or a bad shot, regardless of outcome based on a much larger sample size. And anyone who's going to point to this as an example of, you're wrong about him or you're right about him or how he plays is something foolish to do. But certainly it would be tremendous to see him continue to play at that level. And frankly, if he gets to the line 13 times a game, I don't care if he wants to take 3 or 4 bad shots.
Yeah. Just going back, Matt, we saw the Charlotte game, and Kyle Lowry with a Kobe-esque performance in this one, man. He 6 for 29 overall and 3 for 17 from 3, forcing it on every possession, and really, if he felt he needed to match Jeremy Lin for some reason, I felt, and it completely took him out of his game. And Lin had like 35 in this game, 13 of 22 shooting, and I think it just bugged Kyle Lowry a little too much.
Oh yeah, definitely. Lowry was not in sorts that game, and it was really unpleasant to watch. I did the post game for the next morning, and that was an uncomfortable game to watch because he never found his rhythm. He really showed up. His actually numbers look better just when considering the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. If it wasn't for that 2-minute stretch, his numbers would have just been even further in the tank. It was really a 2-minute game for Lowry, and the rest he was just absent.
Yeah. What about defensively here? I mean, the Raptors ended up shooting 36% here, but Charlotte was 44% for the game. But there's just no answer for Jeremy Lin here, who did essentially the same thing on every possession, which is use the high screen drive and kick. And the Raptors didn't seem to have an answer for the guy at all, which is a weird thing to say, to not have an answer for Jeremy Lin.
Yeah, and Lin has been fantastic for Charlotte this year. He's really opened up a lot of different opportunities for their offense and hasn't been a sieve for their defense, considering how highly it's rated so far. So the shots that Charlotte missed, I really don't know how much of it was actually Toronto impacting it, and how much of it was that they were just missing some shots. From what I saw, it was mostly that both teams were playing poorly, but Toronto just played way worse.
Andrew, your thoughts on Charlotte?
Yeah, it's really weird the way that every time Jeremy Lin has a game like this, like throughout all of Linsanity, it seemed to be the storyline that the much higher regarded player guarding him or going against him just becomes irate that Jeremy Lin is somehow beating him and gets off his game, and they allow him to continue to go right and to find the one Sam high screen drive to the rim or kick out. And it's like when there's someone who shows up at the gym who's just like much older or wearing garbage shoes or out of shape and proceeds to just dominate, and it just drives the supposed to be better guy nuts, and he just doesn't focus, doesn't execute the game plan that, like by and large the league has figured Jeremy Lin out. Like Jeremy Lin got to a point where he could barely play for Houston because they figured out across the league how to take away the 2 or 3 things he can do well. And yeah, he's playing a lot better this year. But it seems like on games like the Raptors game, they're not doing what you need to do to take that one pick and roll through them. Like, don't let him run high pick and roll from the middle and just know that there's only one of 2 outcomes coming from that. And they just seemed either frustrated or uninterested in taking that basic action away. And I don't know how that's able to happen, but it was those 2 weeks in New York City reenacted again.
It's like, and Corey Joseph like this week has not been playing well on either end of the court, and he was guilty on a lot of those Lin scores as well, but against the Pacers as well, against Sacramento tonight as well, like we saw a Corey Joseph that I feel that he needs to take more of the offense on him without. I think he's neglecting passing a little bit more this week. I think we saw, especially against Sacramento, him try to get to the rim a lot without even looking to pass. And I think we didn't see that earlier in the year, and now we're seeing Corey try to do more, and it's almost very un-Spurs-ish of him to adopt that approach.
Yeah, he's falling into the pound the rock strategy from a few years ago. He's really not looking to initiate the offense outside of his own play recently, and that's a concern. But I'm wondering what you guys think about this, what it is for guys who are just backing off him as well. They aren't playing him as tight as they were earlier in the season. So he's not getting to the bucket as easily. At least that's what I think I'm seeing. I haven't looked up numbers on it yet. But I wonder if, similar to what Andrew was saying about Lin, is the scouting reports kind of out? Is that the same case about Corey Joseph right now for this season? he always wants to drive. He's going to need a screen. He's going to back up, a few feet away from his man in order to get up some speed before he goes. And I wonder what of that is scouting from other teams and what of that is Corey feeling a little bit more pressure to score with a shorter lineup.
Yeah. He's shooting 28% from three right now, so obviously the league knows that he's not a good 3-point shooter, and they are backing off him, but he's still driving the ball, except that now when he drives and he gets to the rim, there's a defense there to meet him, and he seems to force the shot and not kick out. It's kind of oversimplifying his approach, but generally I just feel that he's taken the fact that people are backing off of him, Andrew, as a challenge.
I think there's definitely something to that. I've definitely noticed in the Charlotte game and tonight in the Sacramento game a lot too, especially in the second half, that the Raptors seem sort of determined to, once a couple guys who have made things happen this year start whatever it is they're going to do, there's not a lot of off-ball action running around. There's not a lot of guys continuing to jockey for space or looking to set back screens to free up shooters or spot up shooters on the other side of the weak side. It's sort of, all right, Corey Joseph's got the ball. We've set him up where he kind of wants to be. DeMar's got the ball. Lowry's got the ball. Let's kind of or James Johnson more recently as well. He's going to do his thing. We're just going to kind of stand by and watch that. And when you're standing still, it really makes the help defense have a lot easier time get there. And I think maybe that's the result of just playing a lot more with a shorter lineup, or guys getting too comfortable, or I don't know what it is, or they're just assuming that Corey Joseph has been getting to the rim so much that they're going to let that happen, or whoever it is that's been making those plays. But there's a lot of standing still late in the shot clock that is forcing guys to make plays on their own with a defense that has a greater step towards them because of that inaction.
And the assist numbers continue to reflect that. Like in all 4 games this week, the Raptors were out assisted. Even in the game they won in Miami, they were out assisted, and in the league they're 29th in assist percentage. But somehow, Matt, the offense continues to be ranked 5th in the league. Can you explain that for me?
No. No, I don't know how anybody can explain that. It makes no sense to me, especially with the absence of the post scoring of Valanciunas. Without shooters, without somebody that you can throw it into the block for, it really helps that Lowry went off earlier in the season and DeRozan is being efficient right now. But by and large, it makes no sense to me how we are that highly ranked an offensive unit.
We're getting to the line a ridiculous amount of times while playing at a really slow pace, and that's really helping the efficiency a great deal. But it is also starting to slip a little bit, and it's worth noting that there's only 2 points per 100 possession difference between the Raptors being in 5th place and the Raptors being in 16th place, slightly below league average right now. So it's slipping a little bit. There are reasons why it's still kind of as high as it is, but to say that it's, they are much closer to 10th place and 13th place than they are to 3rd and 2nd place in offensive efficiency right now. Like, there is a bundle of teams in that top half of the league that are really, really close together.
Yeah, I see Andrew's done some math here for sure. So it's December 20th, man, or 21st when this podcast is posted. This is Matt. This is almost exactly the time where Kyle Lowry went downhill last season after being worked hard for the first couple of months of the season. Should we fear the same thing happening again?
Oh man, the Raptor fan in me certainly is. Just from the history of our franchise, I tend to think the most negative. I'm hoping that in the upcoming stretch they can get a break. But looking at the upcoming schedule, there's some good opponents coming through, and so it's going to be tough. The good news is that if timelines hold, Valanciunas should be back early January, and I just read that DeMar Carroll on Monday is going to be meeting with a doctor to just get a re-examination of his knee and see how it's coming along. So hopefully in the near future we can get a few extra bodies in, and maybe we can keep Lowry fresher. But if he goes, we're in trouble.
Boy, re-examination of the knee never sounds good, eh?
It doesn't sound great, but there's also been nothing negative. I think it's just kind of a checkup with the hope that he's actually proceeding, kind of a regular tune-up.
Yeah. It's not Dr. James Andrews in Alabama, is it?
No,
Not that guy?
definitely not.
Okay. Andrew, your thoughts on this being this kind of the same date when Lowry went south last year?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly in better shape this year, and hopefully that makes a difference. But I think it's worth. They're one of the few teams right now that don't ever give one of their main stars a night off, and I think much like last year, where there's a lot of people calling for Casey to try to find a way to work Valanciunas into the team's main offense and into the fourth quarter minutes, even if it meant losing some games, it was going to be worth it for the playoffs. I think even with the East being as tight as it is, it's going to be worth it to just give Lowry a night off here and there, or cut his minutes back by 3 or 4 minutes per game. Even if it means 1 or 2 extra losses over the course of the season, you need him to be at his peak in games where you do have a good chance of winning when he's playing, and when you get to the playoffs. I think it's worth giving him some extra rest. I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, but clearly, is it going to happen? Because you saw tonight against Sacramento where the Raptors used an 8-man rotation. They available to them was Bebe, DeLon Wright, Norman Powell, Anthony Bennett, and even Bruno was actually called up for this game, and none of them played. Like, what are the chances of Dwayne Casey actually saying, okay, let me give DeLon Wright 10 minutes a game because I'm gonna give Lowry a break? It like that doesn't seem to be Dwayne Casey's approach when managing a team.
No, and I think there's a couple things there. I think today we can look at the fact that they're already missing Carroll and Valanciunas, and that, yeah, DeLon Wright and Norm Powell were there, but those guys also played big minutes in a 9:05 game earlier on in the day as well. So, look, like, I'm unwilling to accept that the team is unable to change. Certainly we don't have reason to think that Casey will do that, but we see every intelligent team in the league starting to do that more and more, and you like to think that at a certain point they're willing to adapt and change and hopefully incorporate that in, especially if they're seeing that play is starting to drop, that obviously fatigue is playing a role, whether it's mental, physical, or both.
So before we get to Indiana and talk about that horror show briefly, Bismack Biyombo, guys, I know that we don't expect any offense from him, and everything he gives you is a bonus. But holy shit, man! Like, can he not finish a play from 2 feet out? Like, is that really, like, we joke about this, but it's the actual reality that if you give him the ball within 2 feet and he's got one defender to beat, he cannot do it.
Oh no, not at all. It's it's never happening.
Like, is it like we just got to live with that? I mean, I saw in that fourth quarter when Casey inserted him back in. He had DeMar DeRozan, James Johnson, and Bismack Biyombo playing at the same time, and they ran a screen for DeRozan, and the defender just left Biyombo, and it ended up with a turnover, and they ran it back for 2, and that kind of iced the game. He's having, like, maybe you don't notice it in the first 3 quarters of the game, his negative impact on offense, but in the fourth quarter when teams really try to press and they focus on their defense, they do leave him alone, and it actually has a huge negative effect. Like, he's at times, despite his awesome rebounding this week, a bit unplayable in the fourth, especially with like under 3 left.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, when they put him back in the game tonight, it looked like the Raptors had a chance to try to make something happen. And as soon as they replaced Patterson with Biyombo, like, that was it. Or not Patterson, they took Joseph out and put Biyombo in, I think. Something, regardless of what it was, that lineup had absolutely no shooting and no ball handling. And I think it was some combination of turnover, miss, and Sacramento capitalized on all 3 of their possessions. And that was the end of the game. Mm-hmm. He has an exceptional ability to miss from inches away, like he has hooves for hands. I don't think any of us can offer an explanation to it, but you're right that he is borderline unplayable at times.
It's gone from being a little surprising to being comical to downright depressing at this point.
Yeah, he's missing putbacks by, I think, like, going for a putback at the rim as a 7-footer and hitting it off the backboard from one side, play, missing the rim entirely and having it go off on the other side. Like, it's difficult to do that.
And his percentages don't even take into account the times that he gets a wide open pass underneath the hoop because the defense has just abandoned him there. Yeah. And it takes him 3 tries to just pick up the ball.
And that's if he's not playing volleyball with it.
Yeah. It's like he's wearing mittens.
Okay, so hey, one more thing we discovered this week, surprisingly, is that if you give James Johnson minutes, he produces, Matt.
Oh man, I am shocked. Who would have thought this?
Yeah, eh? Like 7 for 11 against the Kings, and some gorgeous moves. Some like he could have been 9 for 11 in this game if it weren't for a couple of tough layups that he kind of rimmed out. But attacking every time, and like what gets me mad is that the defense knows that he has no jumper. They back off of him to test his drive, and he drives, and he still produces results.
Yeah, his footwork is pretty wild for a guy his size. It's a lot of fun. I think sometimes because he's the type of person who can do everything, just doesn't really excel at one thing. But he likes to think that he can.
Yeah.
He plays that way. So sometimes he does try to do a little bit too much, something that's outside of his ability. And I'm sure that is what drives Casey wild. But at the same time, he's a net positive. He has one of the best net ratings on the team, has one of the highest assist percentages. Like he contributes to winning basketball, and the team has proven that they're better with him on the floor.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously, I'm being sarcastic about that, but this is something that finally appears to have dawned on Dwayne Casey when fans were calling this for quite some time. Like his last 6 games, he's 3 for 4, 3 for 6, 2 for 5, 3 for 5, 5 for 9, 7 for 11. Always a high percentage, always rebounding. He's a pretty low turnover guy, with the exception of like the game again in Charlotte. Andrew, you glad that James Johnson seems to have finally, gotten the good graces of Dwayne Casey?
Yeah, tremendously glad. He's been fantastic, and it really opens up the floor and gives them a different look. It's funny the way it works with, like, we can all see the one or two singular mistakes that he might make in a game that we feel like, oh, I get why Dwayne Casey hates him because of this mistake he made, as if everyone on the team doesn't make 1, 2, or 3 mistakes per game. And it was funny, even in tonight's game, we saw late in the fourth, he had 3 baskets and an assist in a 3 or 4 minute stretch. And then he had 1 turnover, and that's when I saw Bismack coming to sub in. I was like, well, he's definitely taking Johnson out because it's weird to have a player who can do so well, and then you see him make 1 mistake, and we just assume that for sure he's being pulled now because that's the relationship that he seems to have with the coaching staff.
Yeah. I don't know if they track mistake per minute, Matt, but I'd say James Johnson would actually, won't be leading the team in that category. There are other people like Biyombo we just talked about, Terrence Ross. Like if you count defensive lapse as a mistake, he's got them all over the map. Patrick Patterson with his missed shots. Like there's a lot of mistakes being made, and James Johnson just seems to have the spotlight on him, which is a bit unfair.
Yeah, I don't know really where that initiated with Casey. There must have been. I still think that there must have been some butting of heads somewhere. But I fully expect, let's say middle of January, both Valanciunas and Carroll return. It's going to be James Johnson minutes that are going to be cut. Suddenly he's got, Ross is still going to be getting minutes at small forward because he's the long-term team piece based on his contract. James Johnson is going to lose minutes, and we could very easily see him from going the 32 minutes that he played tonight to within a month's time going back down to 5, 10, getting a couple did not plays.
If you look at the fluctuation in his minutes played, just looking at his game log on ESPN, it's unexplainable. He's all the way between 2 minutes to 17 to 32 back to 5. It's completely unpredictable, and it's got to be unsettling as a player as well, not to know what you're going to expect every game.
Oh man, I can't imagine the level that he's able to bring this level of consistency, considering that's how he's inserted into the lineup. He could go anywhere from small forward to center, 2 minutes to 20. Tonight he did 32. It's really that would screw with me at least, and so that's some mental toughness to be able to come in and just fit into the lineup no matter what you're told to do.
Yeah, you just don't know what to expect. I mean, this reminds me of. In Japan, guys, when a prisoner is on death row, they actually don't tell him when he's going to get executed. And every morning, 2 guards stop by his cell, and they stop for a moment, and they kind of give him a moment to pause, go, is this the day? and then they walk away. That happens every day. And interviewing some Japanese death row inmates, it's got to be unsettling. And so we can all understand what James Johnson must be going through, Andrew.
Kind of, except instead of finding out whether or not he's going to die that day, he finds out whether or not he's going to get to, I guess, live more. So it's like, it's a little better. He's got a better scenario than the death row inmates. I'll give him that. Yeah. But, I mean, he's been remarkably consistent in his ability to play his game and contribute positively whenever he's been given the chance.
All right.
So I do think that is certainly difficult, and it makes it more impressive that he's been able to step up whenever we kind of need him to. But he's showed that sort of veteran reliance of knowing what his game is, and look, you're going to give me a few chances to get some buckets late, I can do that. You're going to give me a chance to exploit a Marco Bellinelli, no problem. I'm going to start the next two games. I'm going to be a really helpful contributor. And aside from one or two angry rants on Twitter, he hasn't really seemed to make a big deal of it publicly. So the case has been made for him to play a bigger role. And I think as we're talking about how do we find a way to sit guys and get more rest from main players, and what are we going to do as far as making the offense more dynamic and having it have different looks when other teams are settled into how they're going to guard the same sort of plays that we run. It seems like this is a ready-made fit for helping with that, but again, probably not.
It'll be interesting to see how Dwayne Casey screws this up. I guess we got to talk about Indiana because it's a game that actually did happen. So for me here, man, this was all about Luis Scola trying to guard CJ Miles on the perimeter, which was hilarious, Matt.
Oh, yeah. I have CJ Miles on my fantasy team, so at least it worked out for me in one sense. It was Scola is really hit and miss some nights, and he needs to not be put on the perimeter and have to guard somebody who's smaller than him. And that's what Indiana wants to do, and that's what Golden State wants to do, and that's kind of the way the league's going. And so on certain nights, he's going to give you 20 and 10 and have an old throwback for this old man. But in a game against Indiana, he just can't match that style, but the Raptors had no other legs to really throw out there.
I'm not saying the Raptors would have won this game if they had made a lineup change here, but Andrew, I just don't understand how you look at that Indiana lineup and you go, yeah, I'm going to throw Luis Scola out there against CJ Miles and Paul George.
Yeah, the Raptors have kind of made an attempt not to really match up against opponents and just kind of continue doing what it is they want to do. And I think that if you're a team, I mean, even Memphis is a bad example this year because they're getting killed for it. But in the past, they've been a team who was the team you point to and say that's how you kind of beat small ball or something, is you just have a lineup that is your best players and you try to impose your will and make that the case. And the Raptors have seemed intent at times this year on saying, no, we're going to dictate the matchups. And I guess they don't really have the lineup flexibility to really adapt super well all the time. But if you're just getting killed with what you're trying to go out there and do, and it's not even like you have a killer lineup in place on the other end of the floor, you have to change that a lot quicker.
Yeah. And talent dictates matchup at the end of the day. But man, you just look at the lineup, and it's common sense. Luis Scola will struggle. He struggled against Daryl Arthur. He struggled against Phoenix. He struggled with that lineup, and going up against this lineup, it just did not make any sense. But the Raptors did get blown out in this game. 106-90 was the final. They were never really in this game at all, Matt.
Well, they started strong, if I'm remembering correctly. They got out of the gates and really dictated in the first quarter, and then Indiana just dominated. I think they went on like a 30-4 run at one point, and ridiculous, it was over.
I don't even know how you go on a 30-4 run. I guess it's similar to the run that the Kings went on to start the game today.
Yeah, not too far from that.
So that was the week 1-3. The Raptors are now just checking the standings.
16 and 11?
17 and 12.
17 and 12. I'm looking at the wrong date.
Fifth in the Eastern Conference. Again, you lose one game, you're actually out of the playoffs in the East. So the East has become the West, and the West has become the East, where despite being 4 games over 500, 3 games over 500, the Magic sit outside, while in the West it's the opposite, where a team that's actually under 500 sees itself in the playoffs, in the Utah Jazz, 11 and 14. So East is going to be competitive. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, as they say. Will Dwayne Casey rest Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan and risk the standings positions there? But we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about I don't know, maybe some more Terrence Ross or something.
When I started practicing law years ago, I noticed very quickly that the cards were stacked against innocent accident victims. That's not right. That's why my law firm is dedicated to working exclusively on behalf of those who need it the most. I'm Brian Goldfinger of Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. When you're in an accident, we can help you get the compensation you deserve. Visit goldfingerlaw.com and get us working for you.
Cards stacked against innocent victims. Kind of like James Johnson, Andrew.
Exactly like James Johnson. You know, Zarar, I've never been injured at work because I'm a mediocre and lazy employee at best. But I suspect that a lot of our listeners are hardworking, reliable employees. And you know what they should do if they found themselves accidentally injured at work?
What's that?
They should contact Goldfinger Personal Injury lawyers. Goldfinger Law on Twitter. Yeah. I've heard they're great.
Yeah, they are. Brian's a big Raptor fan. We got to get him on actually on the podcast because he does have some pretty interesting stories where he was impersonating Raptor players online and got into trouble for it. Which is maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's too late. I'm not going to edit this out.
Yeah, it's out there. Yeah. It's in the ether.
Yeah, it's so let's part 2 of the podcast is here. Matt joins me from Alberta.
Winnipeg. You got it wrong to begin with.
No one cares either way.
Nobody cares.
It's not in Ontario. It's barely a part of Canada.
I know.
And Andrew's in Aurelia somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. No one knows where that is, so that's also fine.
It's a continental podcast, I'd say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're all living in important places, doing important things.
All right. So let's kind of look ahead to the week, which promises to be. Last week, I think we predicted 3-1, and we went 1-3. So probably shouldn't listen to us.
Well done.
Probably shouldn't listen to us. But let's check the schedule out and see what lies ahead. I'm pulling that up right now as we talk, and here it is. It's in front of me. I can see it. It's Dallas on Tuesday, and then Milwaukee, Fear the Deer on Saturday, and that's it, guys. It's a 2-game week for the Raptors. This is the lightest week they've had so far. Just Dallas and Milwaukee, so plenty of rest. You guys were talking about Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan needing. But we'll do it in case he find a way to give Kyle Lowry 38 minutes of playing time with a 9:05 somehow this week, Matt.
Oh, he will find a way. Lowry will play heavy minutes sometime, somewhere, and we will all scream.
Yeah. Hey, can we talk about 9:05 momentarily? Just I know we don't give too much attention to that, but Anthony Bennett was sent down to the 9:05 and played. And finally played in a game, and he became the highest draft pick ever to participate in the D League. So the Raptors set that record. Your thoughts on Matt? Your thoughts on Anthony Bennett being sent down to the D League? Good for him, bad for him? What is it?
Well, I was at least encouraged that it was him initiating that move, that he went to the team and asked for that opportunity to move down, potentially a little bit of a Corey Joseph influence, that Joseph did that with San Antonio and approached Pop with that. I watched the game today, and Bennett does good things sometimes. His shot doesn't look broken. He battles for rebounds. There was a few points where he read plays really well and was able to get into the passing lane.
His release doesn't look broken. His shot is broken.
And yet it works some of the time.
He's
like it's
16.
Inconsistent.
Which part
There's
works?
Points where it looks fine. It's like, I'm not a shot doctor. It's not my thing. But there's points where his form just changes.
Yeah.
But today he was maybe the 905's third best player, and that would be generous, after Powell and Roberts.
Andrew, just to clarify, his shot looks good 5 out of 16 times, by the way.
Okay. Those, again, not a mathematician, but those numbers sound just tremendous. I think anytime you can be the third best plain on a somewhat okay D-League team, that is a good sign. So no, in all honesty, like, the D-League is the best possible place for him. He's not playing whatsoever on the Raptors, so I don't know how he's going to get better doing that. The D-League is where he should be playing primarily, I think. Like, I really have a hard time seeing an opportunity where the only reason he would play for the Raptors is if, A, it's a massive blowout one way or the other, or B, some sort of viral infection has wiped out the other half of the bench entirely. So he should be playing in the D League, and he should be getting as many minutes as possible to see if there is something salvageable there.
Yeah,
but
you just expect a guy like that who's had several years of NBA experience under his belt to go down to the D League and actually, if not dominate, have strong games. And example, Norman Powell. I mean, you can tell that just by seeing the guy in summer league that he's probably somewhere in between. Like, he's probably too good to be in the D League, but not good enough to get regular rotation like right now with the Raptors. And he was sent down as well, and he was 12 for 18 for 30 points in their win, and he looked phenomenal there. I mean, I saw the highlights here. Everything was working for him, and that's maybe not every night, Andrew, but you expect that kind of performance from a guy who you expect to have an outside shot with the Raptors, not 5 for 16, man.
I mean, sure, but I think, look, we need to all, like, the best thing that could possibly happen for Anthony Bennett would be if we could just collectively forget that he was the number one overall draft pick, because Anthony Bennett redeeming himself as number one overall draft pick will never happen. He shouldn't have been the number one overall draft pick. And he has been an incredible disappointment at that rate. So he needs to find a way not to be a franchise player or one of the best 3 players on a contender. He needs to figure out how it is he can just be a contributing NBA player. Like, that's fine. If he can become a role player that can get 18 to 20 minutes on a team, that's fine. It's going to be a disappointment in the long run, but the Raptors didn't draft him number 1. So just finding a way to turn him into something redeemable should be the goal here. And if he can do that, that's great. But that's going to be a process, because he's been a certain player his entire life, and he's had all these expectations and demands for him to somehow take over and be a dominant force, because that's what we expect from number 1 draft picks. So that's the curve that we grade him on. And I think we need to change that as a fan base, and more importantly, the team and he himself needs to say, okay, like, what is the role that I can fill, and how am I going to change my game to do that as best as possible, instead of trying to figure out how to redeem this nonsense height that I'm not going to get to.
Yeah, you sound like Anthony Bennett's personal injury lawyer, to be honest with you.
I'm available.
But hey, yeah, like, if you're looking for redeemable qualities, and if that's the purpose of the D League is to find a player who you can get something out of, you got a guy by the name of Ronald Roberts there, who's been putting up some good numbers, playing strong. He had 16 points and 4 for 6 shooting and 13 rebounds. Like, if you're looking for something to come out of the D League, it may be Ronald Roberts and not Anthony Bennett. So, like, going back to you, Andrew, like, if you had, and this guy is, he might get a 10-day, or he might, some team might poach him once the date kicks in, where you can sign guys for, once you can get D League guys to play for you. If you had to, you got to get one guy back up to the Raptors. Would you get Ronald Roberts or Anthony Bennett? If you had to cut one of them, who would you cut?
I mean, like, if you had to, it seems like Ronald Roberts has demonstrated more of an ability to contribute. Okay. But I mean, I think you also need, like, the D League, it's the developmental league. The point is long-term development. I think if you're trying to utilize that the best you can. So you need to establish who's the guy that's going to be able to offer the most value to us in a year or 2 years, or how can we help this guy's game develop, not so he can be the 12th guy on our bench, because that's a useless spot anyways. Like, most of the time, anyone wearing a jersey could fill that spot, because you're not going to see any minutes anyways. So how do you develop someone long-term in order to make that a guy who can contribute as the 7th, 6th, or 5th guy down the bench instead of...
What I'm saying is that, as Ronald Roberts is a year and a half older than Anthony Bennett, so if you're looking at youth, they're both would be classified as young players. Yes. But there's going to be a decision for Masai Ujiri to make whether he's going to get Ronald Roberts just walk away. And the only way he can keep him at that point is by cutting somebody from the 15-man roster. And the question is Matt, over to you, because Andrew doesn't want to answer, I guess. Would you rather have Anthony Bennett or Ronald Roberts?
If I had to choose, and I'm probably in the minority here, but I would actually go Bennett. I'm with Andrew on this, is that if we're committed to thinking long-term in regards to these D-League players, if I had to bet between Ronald Roberts and Anthony Bennett, who would still have an NBA career in 3 or 4 years, I would say Bennett. I think that he has the potential to bring a more well-rounded game. Roberts, at least in the D-League action that I've seen, he likes to bully people down on the block, and that can work in the D-League. But he's not going to be able to play that same game in the NBA. And So I have my doubts about him as a call-up. I think that he will definitely get a 10-day this year from a team that's not the Raptors, that he could maybe even get extended for the rest of the season by another team. But if I had to choose, I would pick Bennett.
Ronald Roberts is more fun to say as a name. That
Definitely.
is 100% in his corner.
Although the annoying thing in the game is during the 9:05 game today, the announcers kept calling him Roro, which just drove me nuts.
It's like a Pokemon's name.
Yeah, exactly.
Watch Ronald Roberts become the next Hassan Whiteside in like 2 years. and then replay this conversation.
Yeah, and then we'll delete this podcast.
All right, so let's talk about Dallas. 7:30 p.m. tip-off on Tuesday. It's a home game for the Raptors. Tickets available, cheap, $35 for the Dallas. This used to be like a premium game, but not so much anymore on account of how Dallas is doing. Thoughts on the Mavericks? How much have you seen, Andrew?
Dallas is surprisingly decent this year. Like they've really figured out how to rejuvenate a squad on the fly once again around Dirk Nowitzki. And Dirk, while looking the most physically unhealthy I've ever seen a player look since watching like late career Larry Bird on ESPN Classic, just the way he moves, everything he shoots seems to go in. So I was wrong in taking a shot at Nowitzki earlier on this year. I think Dallas is a team that's really tough to beat.
But where are the Mavericks going really this season? I mean, they're not title contenders. You wouldn't even pick them to make the Western Conference Finals. Like, what's Cuban's approach here? Because he's the type of guy who tends to apply quick fixes on the fly, hoping things work out. And over the last few years, it really hasn't.
No, like they've sort of been burdened by the fact that they are just so far at the end of Nowitzki's career that they don't want to just full on rebuild while he's still there. So they're just trying to patchwork together whatever they can in the meantime. I think they're, as high as the 4 seed maybe if everyone stays healthy and they get really good contributions out of the guys like Matthews and Parsons who are coming off major injuries. And if they suffer a couple of injuries or those guys can't get things together, then they're looking at somewhere between the 8th and the 10th spot in the West. So they don't have their pick this year, probably either way. So there's not a lot of motivation to really tank, but I mean they're in the wilderness as far as that goes.
Yeah. And the Raptors did beat them earlier in the year in Dallas, 102-91. Luis Scola had a pretty big game. Kyle Lowry had 27 points in there. This time around, Matt, thoughts on the Mavericks versus Raptors matchup to watch out for maybe?
There's no excuse for Kyle Lowry and Corey Joseph to not dominate. I absolutely hate the Dallas Maverick point guard rotation between Deron Williams and I'm going blank on the other names.
JJ Barea?
Barea, there we go. I think they're sieves, and Lowry and Joseph should be able to exploit those matchups, so that's where I'm looking. Dirk, I think, is going to kill Scola. I think he's still shooting 50, 40, 90 on the season, which is insane for his age. So I expect a big game from Dirk, and it'll probably be a close one.
Yeah,
Dallas does an excellent job of taking care of the ball and has one of the lowest turnover rates in the league. So can't get out and run.
Yeah, the guy you forgot, I think, was Raymond Felton.
There we go.
Yeah, and
crazy thing. Who do you think is the oldest point guard on their lineup?
Deron Williams.
All right, second oldest.
Raymond Felton.
Devin Harris.
All right. Would you believe me if I told you all three have the exact same birthday?
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, they are all the exact same age.
Man, I wish I had a jingle I could play for fun facts, but I don't.
Yeah, the more you know, Zarar.
Maybe I'll edit it in. Maybe I probably won't. But former Raptor Charlie V returns to the ACC as the crowd boos him in a very confused manner. Andrew, where do you stand on the Charlie V booing?
I mean, I don't know how anyone cares enough about Charlie V
they don't even remember
to boo. Like that's, you gotta want that.
Yeah.
Like I have a really hard time maintaining anger over long periods of time because it's difficult. Like it drains you. You got to put energy into it. And I mean, like, it's not like this guy has gone on and won championships or really played phenomenally for other teams. It's like he did bad for us and good for them, or like he wronged us in somehow, or that he was a top 3 pick. I mean, let it go. Yeah. Let it go.
How old do you think Charlie V is, Andrew?
I think Charlie V is 31 years old.
Yeah, you got it right. Did you look that up?
No, I just guessed.
Okay, call this game for me. Let's start with Matt.
I'm going to try to be optimistic and say we win.
Well, try to be realistic for a second. I mean, optimistic always means
realistic.
We're without Damari Carroll.
We
are without Valanciunas.
Pardon?
We're without Valanciunas and Damari Carroll, so factor that in.
Yeah, factoring that in, I'm still not sold on Parsons coming back from injury. He hasn't been great this year. I think Lowry and Joseph have a matchup that they can exploit, and even Wes Matthews, I think that works. I think that he and DeRozan can play to a draw, and if that's the case, I think that we can have a good shot.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think Dallas probably struggles on the road. I think the Raptors can take this game. They'll actually have some rest.
Yeah, so I'll go with the Mavericks as well. They've beaten them once this year. Luis Scola is just going to destroy Zaza Pachulia and Dirk Nowitzki in the post. That's what's going to happen here.
All right.
All right. So that's a win. So only one more game after that, and it's the Milwaukee Bucks, who we've beaten twice already this year. The Bucks continue their free fall in the Eastern Conference. Andrew, I know you and I love to talk about this, especially Will.
We just love to prove Will Lou wrong because we still won't forgive him for that for the matchup last year. And honestly, I think we beat them again. Yeah. I think that the only team that the Bucks seem to play well against is the Warriors, and I kind of think they got broken at the end of that last game, and they've just looked kind of emotionally like you'd expect them to come out of sticking around with the Warriors with a lot of confidence and swagger, and instead they seem to just kind of be sort of crumbling. Like it seems like the team has got some animosity towards Giannis and the way that he's playing and trying to score, and the lineups are sort of swirling around a little bit, and I'm really not a fan of what Milwaukee does out there with no shooting.
Did you hear they printed T-shirts after they broke the streak? The buck stops here. Streak enders, I believe it's called.
Dude, that's okay. Interesting. Did you see that the Warriors had shirts in response to the 25-1 shirts that the Bucks fans were wearing? They printed out 10-18 shirts to wear to the Warriors home game.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's a good one. And they proceeded to lose that one, 121-112. But the next night they beat actually Phoenix on the road. So they're going to face the Sixers, who still have one win, and then it comes Toronto for them on Saturday night. So the Bucks have 2 days off as well before facing the Raptors at home. But it doesn't really matter. I think Vasquez is out for the season now too, isn't he? I think he's done.
He's out for 3 or 4 months, so
season pretty much, yeah.
I mean, if they make the finals, he could be back.
I would not be surprised if Vasquez in his free time just takes a flight up to Toronto, starts hanging out with the Raptors. Would not be surprised. He loves it here. All right.
We love that first round pick, so it's fine.
Matt, thoughts on Milwaukee?
The one thing that's giving me pause, I think most nights we will beat them. The one thing that's giving me pause is that we'll need to travel on Christmas Day, and I wonder what that will do to our team's mental psyche. But in terms of their team, it's a mess. Michael Carter-Williams is showing exactly the type of player that many feared that he would be. They have no shooting. They are missing Zaza Pachulia very badly down low. And they just are a very not cohesive unit. And even just at the end of after their game today, Jason Kidd announced that he's about to get hip surgery, so even their coach is going to be absent for the next little while, and they're a mess of a franchise at the moment.
So it looks to be hopefully a 2-0 week for the Raptors. But again, the East, the way it's structured right now, is really, really dynamic. Just don't know what's going to happen here. And I think that's going to be the underlying theme over the next couple of months, is that as the Raptors try to stay competitive in this East, how much stress their key players will take, especially in light of injuries, and having a 2-game week here really helps. And the Raptors have actually played the most games in the NBA, so which is something which will even out soon.
And that'll also help the minutes going forward, not necessarily the minutes per game, but the more rest between games later on in the season.
Yeah. Just quickly on Bebe, we didn't see Bebe at all this week. Very limited playing time.
He's coming back from an injury, isn't he?
Yeah, but still though, a little bit more than that. Could have kind of used him there against Sacramento or something, especially for Biombo.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I think that they were certainly willing to play him before, and he was doing well. I have to think that it's probably injury related more than anything else. If they're just not giving him any run whatsoever, because it's not like Biombo has had. I mean, he's had good stretches and some good games, but I don't think that Bebe is suddenly getting ignored because they've decided they can't play him. I think it's probably more he's not offering us enough to make it worth the risk of possibly worsening or re-aggravating an injury or whatever.
All right, fair enough. And I think that kind of wraps things up here. Andrew, thanks for taking time, man.
Thank you, as always, Zarar. What a pleasure.
Good luck with that Twitter account.
Yeah, 105.
What's your Twitter handle again?
At Marmalade Jacko,
Well,
which is really not helping me out.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to guess.
Yeah.
Matt?
Always a pleasure.
Well, thanks for taking time to join the Rapcast. We got to have you on, and I promise to give you at least a week's notice next time.
Hey, works for me. Look forward to it.
All right, guys.
Take care.